In the city in Finland, a mercenary named Radek is sentenced to a long time in jail for his many crimes. Elsewhere, a businessman named Erola leaves a meeting after getting approval to distribute his company's vaccines. Erola is a big businessman who works for a pharmaceutical company named Vala.
Pour la vie économique de notre pays.
Despite his company's research efforts, which led to the release of a vaccine, Erola has faced criticisms from the media regarding how the products were tested. Even though he'll still be unable to distribute his vaccines in his country, the European Union has now approved his license to deliver the vaccines to developing countries. As he's about to head to his car, an investigative journalist named Nina stops him and asks what the ruling means for his company. Erola says it will be a big boost for the Finnish economy, and he's looking forward to the big impact they'll make. Nina then asks about his opinion on the refusal of his own people to accept his vaccines.
Quel organisme subventionne les laboratoires pharmaceutiques?
Erola says he doesn't understand it and that it's a complete mystery to him. Before he walks away, Nina asks about the rumors that Vala illegally tested their vaccines on innocent children. Erola doesn't look happy to hear this, and he says he can't understand why people would spread such false information about a vaccine that will provide a big boost to the economy for the next 10 years. He eventually walks away from the interview, and as he enters his car, he says the world would be a better place without investigative journalists. His son, Rotika, is inside the car, and he says it's just freedom of speech. Erola sounds pissed and tells his son never to interrupt him again. He also warns him never to call him dad while they're at work. As Rotika coughs, Erola gives him a handkerchief to clean his mouth. Erola then complains to his driver, Marsalka,
Mais quand on faisait les cons, nous on nous foutait une bonne branlée.
about how Rotika is very stubborn. He adds that he doesn't think he was that bad growing up because he knows he would have been mercilessly beaten. Rotika then says he doesn't understand the kind of boss his dad is because he never values the opinions of his workers. Erola doesn't seem to care, and he tells his driver to take them home. Later that night, Rotika and his assistant, Lataya, head to a secret bunker to beat up an associate named Kurika, who they believe stole a lot of money from them. As Lataya repeatedly punches Kurika, Rotika keeps asking for their money. Kurika insists that he didn't take any money,
Attends, tu me connais, je suis pas...
and he says he can't believe they'd think he stole from them. Rotika doesn't seem to care, and he orders Lataya to continue beating Kurika, who is now really weak. After a while, Rotika also beats Kurika by himself, but he still says he didn't take their money. The beating continues for a few more minutes before Rotika finally shoots Kurika's legs so that he'll slowly die. As he heads out, he tells his two cleaners to take care of Kurika,
Faut aller s'occuper de Kurika.
and they immediately enter the bunker to do as they've been told. Elsewhere, some of Rotika's men start planning to arrange a cargo that is expected to be sent out of the country in a few hours. While they're at it, one of them brings in a lady he saw on the road. As the lady, Huora, looks around, she sees the guns and vaccines in the warehouse and realizes that she might have just followed the wrong person. Before she can escape, one of the men beats her up and cuffs her. Almost immediately, Rotika calls one of them to ask if they're done with packaging the vaccines. The man says they're almost done, and Rotika sounds pissed that they're not done yet. As he keeps complaining over the phone, the lights in the warehouse go off, and his men wonder what's going on. They eventually send a man named Ri to check what's wrong with the fuse.
Répète, remplace-les.
As he heads toward it, someone appears out of nowhere and slams his head into the fuse box. The other men hear this and look shocked, so they send someone else to check what's happening. All this time, Rotika is still on the phone, and he asks what's going on. The leader of the men at the warehouse tells him that the lights just went off, and they're already trying to fix it. Suddenly, one of the men sees Reap's head inside the fuse box and alerts the others that someone is inside the warehouse with them.
Qui est là?
As they all look shocked, they pick up their guns to attack, but a man with a dark mask appears out of nowhere and kills them one by one before setting their cargo on fire. Huora is still inside the warehouse, and she sees everything that has happened. She also begs the masked man to help her, and he just throws her the keys to her cuffs. After she uncuffs herself, she then leaves hurriedly. Meanwhile, a lady named Marla enters the warehouse and tells the masked vigilante that it's not enough for him to just burn down the cargo. She says he must do something that will make them scared of him. After a while, Huora runs into the road and nearly gets hit by Rotika. He sounds really angry at her, but he doesn't know why she's running. When he and Lataya eventually enter the warehouse, they see the bodies of their men hanging from the top, with the name Rendel written on their backs. Rotika is shocked by this, and he can't believe anyone would try to come for him or his father's business. As he asks what Rendel even means, Lataya says he doesn't know. Before they leave, a pizza delivery guy arrives at the warehouse, but as he announces his presence, Rotika kills him while still looking confused as to what Rendel means. It then turns out that the dark vigilante's name is Rendel, and he's a man out to get revenge.
Il y a un truc dégueu à l'intérieur, allez vous en occuper là.
Many years earlier, a man named Ramo receives a biker jacket from his wife and daughter on his birthday. He thanks them for this and also makes fun of them for getting him such a jacket, even though he doesn't have a bike. Much later, he heads to work and is approached by Kurika, who tells him about Vala and advises him to approve an investment in his company as the financial director. Ramo says he's not going to do that because Vala's goals sound very unrealistic. Kurika still insists that he has to invest in the company, but Ramo refuses to accept the offer. Kurika then says he'll still get Ramo's company to approve the investment because there's surely someone in a more senior role that he can talk to. Ramo says that such investments only go through him because he's the financial director, but Kurika says he'll find a way to bypass him. As he leaves, he calls his boss and reports the situation to him. Kurika's boss then says he'll handle it and get someone else to approve the investment.
Oui, ce Rameau se prend pour un grand directeur financier.
After the call ends, he calls Ramo's boss and tells him to fire Ramo. The man does just this, and Ramo is shocked by his decision. He even tries to understand why he has been sacked, but he's told that someone in a high position gave the order. Ramo asks how he's supposed to feed his family without a job, but his boss says he knows he'll find another place in no time. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned for Ramo, and he gets rejected at many jobs he applies to. His request for a loan is also rejected, and this leaves him frustrated. His wife also starts to get tired of their situation, but she still stays with him. Despite Ramo's frustration, he remains a good father to his daughter and ensures he reads her a bedtime story every night.
Et ensuite, il réparera le cheval, d'accord?
One day, while Ramo is at a bar, Kurika sees him and asks if he's interested in a job at where he works. Ramo doesn't really have any other options, so he agrees to do whatever Kurika wants.
Je vous laisse mes coordonnées.
The next day, he and some other men are lectured by Lataya on the dos and don'ts of the work they'll be doing. They're strictly told to only talk about work and ensure that nothing ever goes missing from the cargo. One of the men makes fun of Lataya, and this gets him pissed, so he punches the man in his face. This gets everyone else scared, and they realize that Lataya won't tolerate any kind of jokes or funny remarks.
Aucune seringue ne doit disparaître.
As all the new guys are told to begin their jobs, Kurika tells Ramo to come with him to where he'll be working. He then takes Ramo to a room where he'll be sorting all the files inside. While looking around, Ramo sees a chemical inside the room, and he asks Kurika about it. Kurika then mentions that it's called Tarnite, and it's used for the vaccines they make at Vala. However, he warns Ramo not to touch it because the chemical sticks to the body and cannot be removed. He adds that when it dries up on the body, it can also be as hard as stone. Ramo says he won't touch it, and Kurika then asks what he told his family he'll be doing at his new job.
Qu'avez-vous dit à votre famille?
Ramo says they don't really know about his new job, and that he only told them that he's now a sorter in a junkyard. Much later, Ramo starts his job and also gets interested in some of the things inside the files he's sorting. He even takes some of them home to read, but this doesn't go down well well with the bosses at Vala, who believe Ramo could expose what they're doing if he knows too much. One day, while he's at home, Rotika and Lataya come to Ramo's house and threaten to kill his wife and daughter for bringing the company's documents home. Ramo begs them not to hurt his family, but Rotika still kills his wife and daughter. Ramo cannot believe his eyes, and as he looks devastated, Lataya hits him with a baseball bat to injure him. Lataya and Rotika then leave him to die inside the house. Luckily, Ramo survives, and as he's now bent on getting revenge, he covers his body with tarnite and decides to become Rendel. Back in the present, Rotika and Lataya wait outside the warehouse for the cleaners to arrive. When they get there, Rotika tells them to go inside to clean up the place, and one of them asks if there are more bodies inside that need to be taken to the hospital. Rotika doesn't get them, and the cleaners then mention that they took Kurika to the hospital. Rotika cannot believe this, and as he scolds them, they mention that they misunderstood his instruction to take care of Kurika.
Donc on doit faire sortir Kurika d'où il est.
Rotika sounds pissed, and he tells them that they were supposed to bury Kurika. As they ask if they can go to the hospital to pick him up, Rotika says he'll handle it. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Rendel goes to Kurika's room and takes him away from there. When Rotika arrives, he's told that Kurika already got discharged, and he angrily shoots the bed. He also looks confused as to how Kurika could have left on his own, even though his legs were shot. Elsewhere, Rendel cancels Kurika's picture on his wall of enemies, and Marla looks happy about the progress he has made so far. The next morning, Huora goes to meet Nina to report everything that happened at the warehouse. It turns out that Nina actually hired Huora to mingle with the men at the warehouse so she could find out what they're actually doing inside. Huora says she was nearly killed before a vigilante showed up and killed all the men inside the warehouse.
C'était un homme plutôt grand, habillé tout en noir.
Nina is shocked to hear this, and she asks more questions about Rendel, but Huora says she doesn't know much about him. After they agree on how much she'll be paid, Huora tells Nina that she heard the men talking about a big shipment, but she doesn't know what they meant. Elsewhere, Rotika goes to see Arola while he's at a pool. Arola doesn't sound happy with how his son has handled the situation so far, and he shows him a pocket watch he got from his father. He adds that the watch has always been passed down to the sons in the family, but he doesn't think Rotika will ever get it because he has never proven himself to be worthy. Rotika sounds disappointed, but he says he'll do his best to handle the situation better. Later that night, Rendel destroys one of Vala's shipments and kills all the men at the site, as he also blows up a van containing the vaccines and very important company documents. Nina appears to be at the scene, and she secretly takes pictures of him. Shortly after, Rotika is informed of what happened, and he heads over there immediately. As he arrives with Lataya, he sees the burnt van and looks angry. He also sounds quite pissed and suggests that someone is trying to mess with their operation. Lataya says it could be someone in their inner circle because only a few people knew about the shipment. Rotika still sounds angry, and he says that since the person messing with them might know about their other shipment, then it's time to come up with a plan to deal with him. Before Rotika leaves, Nina also takes his pictures and realizes that he's the one running his father's secret criminal organization. Later that night, Rendel goes to the other shipment's location and only meets two men who get killed immediately. As he then checks the van, he sees a camera at the back and realizes that it's a setup. It turns out that Rotika set up the camera and is now watching what's happening from the back of a van in another location. His men also start shooting at Rendel, but he manages to beat them all up. Rotika's cleaners have also been given guns to join the fight, but they hide inside a warehouse where Rendel eventually catches them. He then ties them up, and they're forced to beg for mercy. They also mention that they only follow Rotika's orders and have nothing to do with his business. As they also insult Rotika, Rendel leaves them alone. However, Rotika sees everything that happened through a surveillance camera and looks really pissed at the cleaners. After Rendel leaves, he heads into the warehouse, and even though the men are happy to see him, he kills them for talking badly about him. Rotika then sits down and looks defeated as he wonders how he'll now face his father. Later that that day, when he goes to Irola's office, Irola complains about how Rotica still hasn't been able to deal with the masked Vigilante. This gets him really pissed, and as he says he regrets having a son, Rotica says he got a picture. Irola says he doesn't want a picture and that he wants a dead body instead. As he thinks about what to do next, Marsalka suggests inviting Radek and hiring him for the job. Irola likes this idea, and he tells Rotica that he can now sit on the sidelines while the hired mercenary does his job. Almost immediately, Irola calls the warden at the prison where Radek is being incarcerated. As he tells the warden that he wants Radek released, he looks shocked, but he still orders one of his men to bring the prisoner to his office. When he gets there, Radek asks for the phone, but the prison guard tells him to be silent. Radek doesn't take this well, and he beats up the guard in front of the warden, who doesn't say anything. Following this, the warden gives him the phone, and Irola tells him what he's expected to do. Radek agrees to do it, and he calls his other associates from different parts of the world to meet him in Finland for a job.
C'est Jimmy. Là, je peux pas te parler.
As they arrive, Rotica is having fun at a club, but Lataya comes over to call him. Rotica doesn't really hear what he's trying to say, so Lataya kills the singer at the club to ensure that everywhere is silent. He then tells Rotica that Radek is around, and they both leave to meet him. As they get to the meeting spot, Rotica tries to shake Radek's hand, but he doesn't look interested in this. Rotica then tells him about Rendel and shows him a picture of the Vigilante.
Rendel.
He also mentions that Rendel has managed to escape from his men every time they've tried to kill him. He adds that Rendel just dances around the bullets. Radek and his crew don't seem to care about what he can do. They also agree to take the deal, after which they leave. A while later, Rotica leaves the club looking drunk, and Rendel sees him. As Rendel is about to follow Rotica, Marla tells him that they're trying to set him up, but he still follows Rotica's car as he leaves. When he gets to the warehouse, Rotica's car is parked. Rendel enters the place and looks around for him. Unfortunately, he gets attacked by one of Radek's partners named Stacy. Even though she fights quite well, Rendel ends up beating her up as Rotica's men start shooting at him. He runs away and eventually gets attacked by the rest of Radek's crew. Quite interestingly, Rendel beats and kills them all. When Radek shows up to fight him, Rendel doesn't really look interested, and he just throws a heavy object at him. Shortly after, Stacy shows up to fight him again, and this time she injures him badly. Before she kills him though, he gets the upper hand and kills her. Rotica looks really pissed about this and shoots his TV angrily. As he goes to the warehouse, he sees Radek still alive and looking for his belt. Rotica says it was what Rendel used to kill Stacy, and Radek just walks away looking angry. As Rendel heads home, he looks badly injured and falls to the ground. He then remembers the day his wife and daughter were killed. He also thinks about how badly he felt, and this motivates him to continue on his mission. As he gets home, he cleans his wound and goes through a lot of pain. Shortly after, Irola gets a call from his boss, who lashes out at him for failing to meet up with the delivery. Irola apologizes for this and says that the delay is because of a masked man who has been destroying their shipment. His boss doesn't seem to care, and he insults Irola.
Allez vous faire foutre avec votre fils.
Almost immediately, Rotica enters the office and informs his dad that things went really bad at the warehouse. Irola sounds pissed and takes out his anger on Rotica. He also blames Rotica for not handling the situation well in the first instance. He says he regrets giving birth to Rotica and that his son is his greatest mistake. Rotica doesn't like this, and he points a gun at his dad, but he doesn't have the courage to pull the trigger. Irola then calls him a coward and sends him away.
Plus t'as pas de couilles.
As he leaves, Marsalka scolds Irola for talking to his son like that. He also says he can't believe he would go to such lengths to embarrass his son just because he's angry. Meanwhile, as Rotica gets outside, he throws away his dad's handkerchief and walks over to meet Radek and Lataya. As Rotica sees one of his men sitting on his car, he angrily pushes him away before killing him. He then tells Radek and Lataya to follow him into the car. As they enter, Rotica uses a the radio to tell all his men to meet him at the factory. Elsewhere, Rendel opens a small gift his daughter gave him on his birthday. He sees a necklace inside, and this reminds him of what he lost. He eventually leaves the house and goes to see Kurika in a tunnel. Kurika gives him a box containing the things he needs, and Rendel also gives him some documents that will incriminate Irola and his son. Kurika says he'll get it to the right people, and he also gives Rendel a bag of money. Rendel doesn't look interested in this, and he returns the bag to him. Kurika then promises to leave Finland and start an honest business wherever he settles down. He also advises Rendel to lay low for a while because, based on what he heard from Vala's radio frequencies,
Je vous promets que je vais me tirer de cette ville le plus vite possible.
Rotika has already called all his men to the factory to start planning how to take down the Vigilante. Rendel doesn't say anything, and he just walks away. Meanwhile, Rotiki looks anxious and talks about how he's looking forward to seeing Rendel come to the factory. Rodek then asks if Rotika even knows the meaning of the word, and as he says he doesn't, he's told that Rendel is a Hungarian word for order.
Le mot Rendel.
Rotika doesn't know what this could mean, and as he asks for help with understanding it, Rodek tells him to figure it out himself. Nina appears to be at the factory, and as she takes several pictures of Rotika and his men, Lataya eventually sees her. He then takes her to meet Rotika, who recognizes her and looks pissed because she's the investigative journalist who wants to bring down Vala. As Nina says that his dad is using him, Rotika punches her in the face and tells Lataya to tie her up to a forklift. After he does this, Rotika enters the forklift, but as he's about to drive it and slam her against the wall, he's unable to move it. He eventually gets frustrated and tries to use a drill to injure her eyes, but before he does this, Lataya notices that some of their men are no longer responding to his radio messages. Rotika realizes that Rendel is likely around, so he instructs Lataya to tell everyone to head toward where the men might have been killed. As they get there, Rendel kills them all, and Marla looks happy with what he has done. Rotika doesn't get any response from his men, and this leaves him worried. As Rodek then asks what's happening, Rotika tells him that Rendel is around and he needs to be killed. Shortly after, Rendel sees Nina tied to a forklift, but before he can help her, she tells him that it's a trap. Suddenly, Rodek appears in front of him and says he's ready for another round of fighting with him. Rendel then frees Nina and starts walking toward Rodek, who is ready to attack him. Before he gets close to him, Rodek starts lamenting about how Rendel killed his colleagues and also left him to die. Rendel doesn't seem interested in this, and he just lands a car on Rodek to kill him. As he turns back, he sees Rotika standing nearby, so he scratches his car with a blade to get him pissed. Rotika then sounds pissed and tells Lataya to kill him. Following this, Rendel faces Lataya, but he turns out to be a worthy opponent. He ends up beating Rendel quite well, and the Vigilante is only able to land a few blows on Lataya, just as Rendel gets really weak. Marla stands in between him and Lataya. Before he knows what's happening, Lataya stabs her, but it turns out that she doesn't exist, and it's actually Rendel who has been stabbed. As he thinks about Marla and how she's only a character he created in his head to keep motivating him, Lataya nearly kills him with a baseball bat, but he dodges the strike. He then regains his strength and beats up Lataya before killing him, much to Rotika's disbelief. As he leaves with his car, Rendel tries to stop him, but he's already too weak, and Nina comes to his aid when he falls down. Elsewhere, Irola's boss sounds disappointed in how he has handled things with Vala. He also asks if it's possible to get the files Rendel stole from them.
Moi, c'est mon fils qui prendra la tête des opérations.
Irola says it's gone, and his boss asks if he knows what will happen to him next. Irola says his son will take charge of Vela after him, and his boss mentions that the company will continue to try to develop more vaccines that will change the world. He also says he hopes that Rotika will be a more capable leader for the company. Just then, the call ends, and Rotika enters the office. He doesn't say anything to his dad, but as he sits down, Irola looks prepared for his death. After he takes one last glance at his pocket watch, he drops it on the table, and Rotika kills him. He then watches his dad take his last breath, after which he picks up the pocket watch and leaves. As he's about to enter his car, he sees Rendel standing opposite at him. This leaves him shocked, but as Rendel starts running toward him, he brings out his gun and tries to shoot him. Unfortunately, he misses his target and decides to run toward Rendel too. Rendel then hits him, but as he gets really weak, Rotika gets the upper hand and starts beating him up. When Rendel is too weak to stand, Rotika tells him to wait while he picks up something from his car's trunk. As he eventually gets a gun, he looks up and sees that Rendel is no longer on the floor. He looks shocked by this, but before he knows what's happening, Rendel attacks him and knocks him down in front of the trunk. As Rotika tries to fight back, Rendel stabs his neck with some syringes, and he dies. Rendel looks relieved and sits next to Rotika's dead body while in pain. Just then, Nina drives a van to the scene and waits for Rendel to decide whether he'll come with her. Quite interestingly, Rendel just stands up and walks away from the scene, and Nina looks confused. A while later, Rendel stands on the roof of a building, looking motivated and ready to take down more bad guys. Elsewhere, Irola's boss hears about Rotika's death and calls another associate to inform him that he'll now take control of the mission by himself. He adds that he'll also put a stop to whatever Rendel thinks he's doing.
Je ne reculerai pas.
Pushing people to the limit sometimes comes with consequences. When Lataya and Rotika killed Ramo's wife and daughter, they didn't think he'd survive and come back for them. He made an innocent mistake and even pleaded for them to leave his family, but their arrogance blinded them and they refused to listen. With this, Ramo turned his pain into a motivation to make them pay for what they did. If there's anything to learn from this, it's that you should never underestimate the strength of a broken man seeking justice.